Thank you all for being here. I'm proud to be here. I've been a trustee of the Heritage Foundation for about a decade now, and this transition is a wonderful thing and a terrible thing, too. So we all have mixed feelings about it. I'm going to talk about the three subjects that are suggested by the transition: the past and the future, and the most important thing, the present. The present being the time when we get to live and act, and the only time that we actually have. I gave a gift to Ed Feulner this morning. Last night, you probably know there was several hundred of his closest friends who came to have dinner with him and say goodbye to him. Of course, we're not saying goodbye. We're going to work with him and know him and love him and laugh at him and achieve with him as we have for so long. And I thought for some months, because I've known Ed for 31 years now, I think. I think I met him at a Philadelphia Society meeting in Chicago. And I thought for a long time what I should give him on the time of his retirement, because I know it's difficult for him. And I gave him a book by Winston Churchill. It's an easy call. Churchill wrote a book called Great Contemporaries. The book is, I gave him a first American edition of the book because it is terribly old-fashioned and loves things that are old and has a fancy library, and Linda keeps it clean. This is an interesting book because the book is about 25, actually only 21 in the first edition, because he left 4 of them out because of contemporary political situations. He didn't include Leon Trotsky because he didn't want to offend Joseph Stalin, because he thought he might need Joseph Stalin to help him fight Adolf Hitler, who, however, is in the book. There's a tyrant in the book, Hitler. There's enemies in the book, King Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany and General and later President Hindenburg. His closest friend is in the book, a man named F.E. Smith, Lord Birkenhead, really great guy. Churchill wrote of him one time, he didn't die wealthy. He piled up his treasure in the hearts of his friends. Smith was a great man. To have that said of you by Winston Churchill would be a wonderful thing. And it raises the question, what do all these people in this book that I've just given Ed Feulner have in common? Because they don't have anything in common, except on the surface, that is. But they have something in common with Ed. They're all great. They did something significant. And Churchill thinks that this significance of what they did, it's one of the great themes of his life, is that when people make choices and the choices make a difference, it is a vindication of human responsibility. Also, many of the people in this book made evil choices. One of these people in this book, Winston Churchill, was to kill, because Adolf Hitler was surely a man who needed killing. And in 1936, when Churchill wrote the essay, you couldn't say that for sure. But when the time came, and everybody in Britain in 1940 thought, we're going to have to make a deal with this guy, he's triumphant. What Churchill thought and what Churchill said is, no, we're going to kill that man, because he's got it coming. Because you see, human choice is the alternative to what we think today dominates everything, and that's history or trends. Listen to the speeches of the President of the United States. What he says is, things are going a certain way. We're arriving at the new day, and the new day is inevitable. But is it? He himself is a man who makes a difference. And if he can do that, then that means that we can do that. And I gave Ed the book because he's one of the greatest men I have known. I can even tell you what it is about him that's interesting. Most people, to understand their character, and that word character is a big word. It comes from the Greek word that means to etch or engrave in something. It's the thing about a thing that makes it what it is. And most characters, you can understand them if you understand contradictions in them, things that don't seem to fit together properly. And there are 2 about Ed that I've always noticed. One is, he's so obviously effective, and he's a terrible blusterer. Probably you people don't see it because he wants to be kind to you. But he is awful, and he He seems short-tempered sometimes. People who've worked with him for 20 years are sometimes afraid of what he might say to them. And he's terribly effective because, think what he's done to work in this city this way for 40 years. He's seen friends go to jail. He stood by them when they did. We live in a welter of regulations that can cause a person to be prosecuted. We're all, by the way, in disobedience of some important law, sitting here right now, whatever that law may be. And you got to wonder if you work in this city, because it isn't really the rule of law anymore. You got to wonder if it'll turn against you and it'll undo your life's work and blemish your reputation. And you think he doesn't get up in the morning, every morning for 40 years and worry about that? Of course he does, all the time. So that incredible effectiveness that goes along with his blustering and awful behavior, that fits along with something else about him, though. And that something is, he's one of the nicest people I ever met. In fact, several times in our friendship, I have looked at him and said, you need to go fix that. He would say to me, what would you do? And I said, I would fire that person. I would tell that person the following thing. I would say it right to their face, right now. I'd do it right now. And he won't very often. He even said something about it in public. Why? What reconciles those two things? Ed is a lover. Ed loves. Things move him. He fights for them every day, all day. He doesn't want to hurt anything. He wants to help things. I congratulate him. Past. Where are we? I'll put the point personally. Has Ed Feulner's life been a success? He has seen the Reagan administration, triumph, glory, improvement. He helped to make it so. He watched the fall of the Berlin Wall. He helped to tear it down. The worst evil in the world. It actually killed a lot more people than Hitler, and it lasted 60 years. And it fell, and he saw that. Do you know that the last word in the title of the last book that Winston Churchill ever wrote is tragedy? Triumph and tragedy. His life ended with a kind of tragedy. That means that every life, Ed Feulner's life, things have not all gone right. Look at the situation today. The economy is preparing itself for a catastrophe. And I actually think, by the way, that it's so easy to overestimate how imminent that catastrophe is, because, first of all, these are huge things, and the world economy is growing, and whole new populations are coming into production, and we are more stable than most places. It's possible that we have advantages that could make it possible for us to afford all this madness indefinitely. Seems to have done so. On the other hand, what'd your father and your mother teach you? Can you live beyond your means? We have more debt right now than we had at the end of the Second World War, and it's actually true by one accounting of it. My friend Nursey down there, who always likes to be gloomy, it's the reason he went bald so early. He likes to say, I looked it up, I couldn't believe it. He sent me an email to say it, and it just horrified me. It's actually true, I think. He's right. Nursey is also terribly good with numbers, unfortunately. I think if you add up all of the assets of the American people, public and private, everything across this great continent that we have settled, that we actually have a negative balance sheet now. Public and private assets are less than public and private obligations. And that debt that we have today is larger than the debt at the end of the Second World War, and we contracted that debt in order to fight the Second World War, which is the greatest conflict in human history. And what if such a conflict comes along now? Where will we get the capital to fight it? Hard to say. Terrible situation. And that is not the worst of it. Because the worst of it is a political thing, and the political thing is the cause of all these troubles that we have that are everywhere. And one can state the political thing in very succinct terms. It is not difficult to understand what's going on. It just so happens that we live in the country that is founded with a unique relationship between the public and the private. And all of us in this room, all of us, how many in this room are children of dukes and earls? Right? I grew up in Pocahontas, Arkansas, the son of a school teacher. Went to college. Nobody else in his family did. Why am I here? I'm here because in this country, it is arranged that the governed are in charge of the government. And Madison puts the point in constitutional or legal terms. He says, it is a purely representative form of government, and that means that there's this large private thing and this small government thing. And this large private thing has all the authority over the government. Nobody working in the government has any authority except it comes from them. And that is the first step in American constitutionalism. It is a purely representative form. But the second step is also important, and that is all this huge thing out here can't do anything except through the people it elects. And so it's a two-step process. It means that those in the government are restrained by the people who own it outside, but the people outside are restrained because they don't get to act themselves. And Madison says that will encourage us to do simple things like thinking before we act. Because we're all just matter and heck. And the trouble is we have to wait till November to do something about it. And that means we talk and talk and talk and talk. Just like your mother said, think before you act. Why not? It's a beautiful system. And it depends upon this relationship between the public and the private. And that means that elections are incredibly important in America. And did you know that if you look up the list of the 10 biggest givers in politics, either 4 or 5, it depends on how you count the SEIU, which is partly a public and partly a private union, 4 or 5 of the top 10 are public employee unions, and the money comes from inside the government to choose how the government is elected. And of the rest, several of them are large PACs of corporations. Did you know that no Fortune 500 company had an address or a phone number in Washington, D.C. in 1960? Look at it today. All of the ugly parts of Washington are unconstitutional, or else they are organized to lobby the unconstitutional parts. And that means that government has become a vast interest now. 45% of the gross domestic product of the country, and in the last 2 years not growing, thank God for it, but likely to as healthcare kicks in, so that you could see a time when in this unique human society that has produced the characters of everyone in this room, in this society, the government could be larger than the private sector. And then the question is, how will we control it? And we are approaching that. It's coming soon. Now, it's possible that the argument is correct that is made for this, and that is that this is a decentralized, widely dispersed, scientifically trained, modern and bureaucratic form of administration that is safe because of its variety and because of its spirit, which is the argument of the progressive movement. But we're coming, you see. This is where the past has brought us. We are coming to the place where we must choose between that assertion. And it's urgent, that assertion. Did you know that they have passed a thing? It has a prosecutorial power to regulate every consumer financial transaction in the country. Everyone without, and for example, it regulates private student loans. And if it extends its control over Hillsdale College, it will have the power of a bank examiner over our college. That means they can come in our college and read any piece of paper any day they want to, because we give loans to our students without any support from the government. You see? And that agency does not get its budget from the Congress of the United States. it gets its budget as a percentage of the budget of the Federal Reserve of the United States. And the Federal Reserve gets its budget from its operations as a bank, as a monopoly bank. And that means, and did you know, in the legislation, the Dodd-Frank financial bill, the Congress is forbidden to hold hearings into the budget of that agency. And so it is sealed off from lobbyists, is why it says that's done. It is sealed off from us. And I may hear from them. And then, by the way, will they raise their eyebrow because I gave a speech being critical of them? Must I fear for my right to speak to you as I please? Because against that claim that the modern bureaucratic form, against that claim that that is safe because it is scientific and professional and academically trained, there is this claim from James Madison. He says that the reason for the constitutional provisions is because men are not angels, and angels do not govern men. And that means that every human being, it means that we need to be in this large society that controls our government because they are not angels. But we too need to be controlled by the law and the constitutional forms because we are not angels either. And it is in that relationship, you see, which is actually, if you think about it for a second, a relationship between man and God. And it is recognized in the structure of the government of the United States and in its principles. And that relationship is the thing that is near to being overcome. And if we lose that, we will have lost all. The last best hope of mankind on earth. That's what that phrase means. Said by Jefferson, repeated by Lincoln. You see? And do you think what that means? Because I want you to understand, I'm talking about this moment of transition at Heritage, and the moment that the past has brought us to is a moment where we are going to have to live like the people who built our country and the people who saved it in the Civil War. And we are not getting to live a life like spoiled children who get to squander a little bit of our heritage and pass on something still pretty good to the people who come after it. We are going to have to save it now. Ed likes to say that there are no permanent victories, and I agree with that and don't. Because, of course, when the last trump soundeth, then there'll be a permanent victory or defeat. But also it's true that along the way, there are dispositive events that change things for a long time. And we are near to those now. And I asked the question about the past, has Ed's life been a success or a failure? And I think I can explain to you why it is an unmitigated success. Because the point is, we only have the time to act that we have. And there are a few great forces alive to help us get through this mess. And this in this room is one of them. And we are all brought here together today by Ed Feulner. Not one of us would be in this room right now, except for what he's done. He hasn't fixed the problem, but he has forged us into a weapon to work on the problem. Thank him for that. About the future, I'll only say that it's only of interest because it's better to know where you're going. It'll make you do better in the present. And it's easy to see what has to be done. There are three simple things. And these three simple things are contained in about 600 words in the middle of the Declaration of Independence. Almost no one reads these words anymore. There's not 50 people in this city who can tell you what I'm about to tell you. And it comes from the center of a 1,300-word document that is the most famous political document in human history. We should build a government that is representative again. That means that all of the parts of it should be accountable to the people of the United States. That means that this bureaucracy has got to be limited, and and its laws must be subjected to the regular political forms of the Constitution of the United States. The claim against the King of England that caused the revolution in the United States, the first claim against the King of England, is that he has suspended our legislatures, and it has made them inconvenient for our representatives to pass laws that will govern us according to our consent. Do you realize we do not raise that claim in politics today, and that is the most powerful claim. The fact that we do not raise that claim shows that we do not understand that we are on the side of the people of the United States, of every color and gender of them, of every wealth class of them. We are on their side, and we do not know that ourselves, and that's why we cannot talk. The second thing is the powers of the government are to be separated, because just like us, each individual one of us, no one is to be given unaccountable power over anyone else, and the powers are to be divided because we are all human. Did you know when the federal government and the Carter administration came after Hillsdale College that we were brought up before a rule that was passed in the Health and Education and Welfare Department before they divided that thing and made it 3 uglies instead of 1? Go look at the Department of Education building. It is the ugliest building in Washington. And there is no one in it who is a teacher. And I know that, although I never go in there, because I read what they write, and teachers don't write like that. But we were accused under a law that they had passed, a rule that they had passed, and the person who contacted us to enforce this law upon us was the executive branch working in that same agency. And that's the way the bureaucracy works. But then we protested. No, we're not going to do it. We said, shut up. And so we sued them. We had to sue them in front of them. And that means that they appointed a judge working on their payroll to hear our case, and we're in Washington, they're in Washington, D.C., Hillsdale College is in Hillsdale, Michigan, and so they held hearings in Denver. To be convenient, I guess. And it took a year and a half, and in a miracle, we won. And then the next day, the secretary vacated the judgment, and we had to start over in federal court. Separation of powers. Against the king, the Declaration says, he has made the judges dependent upon his will alone. Finally, the government should be limited. It mustn't be bigger than the people. Why do we not say that? Isn't that easy? Shouldn't Mitt Romney have said that? The government of the United States should not be bigger than the people of the United States. Should it, Barack Obama? What are you for? Because the people are deeply mistrustful of this government. They need somebody. He has sent among us swarms of officials to harass our people and eat out their substance. That's a quote from the Declaration of Independence. So the future, in my opinion, is about those 3 things. And I'll close with the present. I said that the present is the only time when we get to live. What should we say right now? First of all, we should name the source of the problem. I'll read it to you. It's a short quote. It's the source of all these problems. Implicit in the Constitution structure, in the very idea of ordered liberty, was a rejection of absolute truth. You ever heard that quote before? Does it seem true? Implicit in the Constitution structure, in the very idea of ordered liberty, was a rejection of absolute truth. Now, does that seem true? Because the best friend of the author of the Constitution, more than anybody else, James Madison, was Thomas Jefferson. And in the Federalist Papers, when James Madison says, where did we get the authority to write this Constitution, he quotes the Declaration of Independence. And what does the Declaration of Independence say? Its first sentence. This sentence, by the way, was quoted to Clarence Thomas when he was up for confirmation in the Senate. Where did you get this odd idea of the natural law, they kept saying. You know, in a room full of 300 lawyers, on national television with all of the great expert commentators, and nobody could figure out where that idea came from. Where did he get that notion? And I know him a bit, and I'm so proud to know him. I think he's the greatest living American. I actually do think that. But it's a personal thing. Anyway, He said to me after it was over, he said, "Do you think I didn't give a very good answer to that question?" I said, "Lord Justice, what do you think?" He said, "I didn't want to quote to them the first sentence in the Declaration of Independence. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands that have connected them to another and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitled them." Do you understand that that is the foundation and basis of your freedom? Do you understand that those words were written by wanted men to the most powerful man on earth to say to them, "We will die rather than let you rule us without our consent, because there is a law," Hamilton says, "written as with a sunbeam in the whole volume of human nature by the hand of divinity itself." You see, the guardian of our freedom is in the laws of nature and of nature's God, and they are denied in this quote. And this quote was published in 2006. And the man who wrote this quote has run for president of the United States twice. And they have spent $2.5 billion trying to beat him, and no one has made famous that this quote is the abnegation of the principles of the United States of America. And more than that, this quote is a practical statement in the book Audacity of Hope by Barack Obama that if I am elected president, I will feel the warrant to do whatever I please because there is no principle to restrain me except what I want and can get the power to do. I think if we know the source of this problem, we can call it for what it is: creeping despotism coming over us. And then, if we can talk like that, then the people of the United States can get back on our side. Now, I happen to know that the new president of the Heritage Foundation, Mr. DeMint, is intending to talk to the people yet more than the Heritage Foundation has done in the past. And I expect that talk will be eloquent. And then in the present, we will do what we must do to recover the faith of our fathers. And if we do that, we will find that a weapon for us as it was a weapon for them in making this magical and unbelievable place. And if we don't manage to restore it and make it what it's supposed to be, we can have the honor in any case of dying in the attempt. Thank you.